Okay, we're back. We all had our little bathroom break. We checked for any sticky substances on door handles so we weren't poisoned. But that's where we left off. And
it sounds like a movie.
I'm telling you,
really
we
sounds...
think that we're like, sometimes we go, that doesn't happen in real life. There's no way.
Yeah, but that happens of other governments, not the one that we're... Or protecting us.
Yeah.
Or it happens and the guy dies and nobody ever finds out what really happened.
True.
Like Epstein, right?
Or they get ran over by a car.
Right,
and it's considered suicide.
Yeah. Or, what was it? There was a real well-known whistleblower, Philip Haney, who was one of the founding charter members of the Department of Homeland Security a couple years ago, committed suicide, shot himself in the chest, and was found next to his car at a park and ride with a suicide note. And the crazy thing about it was the guy was a devout Christian. There's no way he would have done that. And he was getting married, his wife had passed away several years before, and he was getting married and was getting his job back at DHS. I mean, all these great things were happening for him. But he had a second book coming out that was going to expose a whole lot of stuff about the Obama administration. And, where did that book go? Never got published, but yet they're still claiming that he committed suicide. So,
yeah. So just so everyone knows, tomorrow I did not run over myself with my riding lawnmower.
That's right.
So obviously, all that coming to a head brought you to where we are today, and that's your run for Congress, because you see the need for change. Something's got to change.
So to wrap up the story, because there's more that happened, but bottom line is I ended up eventually going and meeting with my attorney, and we went down and we talked to Lindsey Graham's he had just taken over as the chairman of the Judiciary for the Senate. I never met him or talked to him, but I called his office. They set up a meeting with their investigative counsel, and we met with them. I gave my account of everything. And the FBI agent that had been persecuting me 2 weeks later, was no longer persecuting me. And so everything stopped. All of the harassment, everything. But we continued to experience, some weird stuff. Like I said, I had signals, that were showing up on my phone that, and I know what these things mean because I had been read on to all of these tools. Yeah. So I knew I was still being surveilled. We had it had snowed, and there were 3 perfect circles in the snow, no footsteps or nothing, and I'm certain that a drone had come in and been spying on us through, a window in our upper room. And so there's just like things like that happening. I went and I tried to get a concealed carry especially after the poisoning thing, and they, even though I had death threats, and I had documented death threats and on social media, and I had also had blown the whistle on Hillary Clinton. It's like, and Russian intelligence agents had been poisoned. I couldn't get a concealed carry in Maryland, where we were living. And so, interesting. Before I even blew the whistle, I had this feeling, the sense that we needed to buy land in West Virginia, and I didn't realize that we needed to just up and move there. But after that, I never felt safe in my home again. I didn't know if they bugged our rooms. I didn't know what was going on, and I just didn't feel safe. So I said we need to move, and we moved to Hedgesville, West Virginia, and never looked back. And it was the greatest feeling in the world when I came to West Virginia and I walked into a gun store that's right on the border up there by, it's in West Virginia in Falling Waters, a great place called Hafer's. I'll just give them a plug because they're good people. But I went in there and they had a blowtorch for sale that shoots gas 40 feet. And it said, for sale in West Virginia only, not to be sold to people in Maryland. And I was like, I moved to the right place. And so I have a pretty extensive collection of guns, which I do enjoy shooting and have a lot of fun.
I thought you were going to say an extensive
blow
collection
torches.
of blow torches.
Oh, I do have one,
You
but
have
not.
one?
Yeah, but the one I have is really it's more for like at least I claim it's for weeding. But but yeah, it's fun.
Now, West Virginia, where we're allowed to open carry and conceal carry.
That's right.
So I have a question because you're running for House of Representatives 2nd District. What is the 2nd District?
So the 2nd District was changed after the last election when they did.
Yeah, there was a lot of redistricting.
Yeah. So so it includes the Eastern Panhandle, the Northern Panhandle, and basically all the way south of there down to about Parkersburg, Wood County, and then it kind of makes a line across. And it does not include Pendleton, but it does include Grant and Hardy, and Hampshire and
Tucker.
Tucker, and it kind of makes its way across like Ritchie, Doddridge, and then it's like basically everything north of there.
How many districts are there in the state of West Virginia?
Only 2.
Okay, so are you considered like the North District or? Yeah,
there's only two congressional districts.
Okay.
And for whatever reason, the 1st district is in the southern part, and the 2nd district's in the top part.
Who represents the southern districts?
I can't remember her name, but I know the guy who's running against her, and I like him a lot. And it's Derek Evans is running, but I can't remember her name. But she's kind of she's a nice lady and everything, but she definitely she's not as conservative as I think West Virginians are.
Now, no, wait. So we're talking about House of Representatives.
That's right.
For the state of West Virginia for the United States government.
for the federal government.
For the federal government. Yeah. I've met her.
Yeah.
I do not know her name. She is the second in charge for the House and Ways and Means Committee.
Was she here?
Which I was here. I got to go down there and experience that. They did the very first one here in Petersburg, West Virginia. Yeah. The very first one out of the Capitol, the very first one since the Republicans took over.
Wow.
And they had it here, and I was invited. There was only like 30 that were allowed to come, and I was invited to go.
Yeah.
And did a podcast on it. So I know who you're talking about. I don't know her name either.
Yeah,
but I do know who you're talking about.
I can't remember off the top of my head, but
okay.
But yeah, so I'm looking. I'm running for the basically the whole northern half of the state to represent, and I, last summer was the best summer of my life. Since we moved to West Virginia, shortly after we moved, I think, or actually might have been even before, Twitter permanently banned my social media account. So I was like, yay. Now I can go away and nobody can say that I just ignored them. So I because I had 200,000 followers on Twitter, and so people wanted me to continue to talk about these matters. But the truth is that I just wanted to get my life back, and so it was actually quite nice. I kind of started getting my anonymity back. We bought this beautiful house. I mean, way bigger than we need, but it was just awesome. Home near the Potomac River. Near a 9-mile stretch of deep water Potomac, and so when my wife's like, "Oh, I really like this house, and I could see God using this place to bless others," and I'm like, "Yeah, but somebody's gonna have to clean this place, and take care of this yard, and our kids are all getting older and they're moving out, so somebody's gonna have to do it, and it's gonna be me."
How many kids do you have total?
Four kids.
Four kids. Okay.
Three boys, and then our youngest is my daughter. So.
Okay.
But they're all adults now, and so we, my wife, I was looking at this other property that was further away that had like some cow pastures, and I was, I'm thinking, the apocalypse is coming, so I want to raise my own cattle and be completely away, as far away from DC as possible. But she was, well, I think you should consider this property, and it was a pretty good deal on it because it had some water damage and things like that. But we got a great deal on it, and I told her they had a marina, and I told her, I said, well, the one deal is if we buy this place, I get a boat. and so it took a couple years, but I remember when after we blew the whistle, I mean, the FBI they did another thing too. They made sure I lost my job at the VA. They told them, basically that they wouldn't, they didn't recommend that they would trust me again and that kind of thing. But so I got cut loose from there, And we went through some financial hardship, because of all of that. But the Lord continued to provide, and we always had what we needed. We didn't always have what we wanted, but we had what we needed, and God got us through it. And I'll never forget, because somebody had sent me a message on Twitter and had kind of prophesied over us, and they said, I'm just going to tell you this, but last night I had a dream, and God told me that He was going to restore everything that was taken from you, so not to worry. And we moved here, and within a matter of 5 years, I was making more money than I was making when I worked for the FBI, which was the most money I'd ever made in my life. I started my own business, and that was part of the reason, but it all came about because of COVID. COVID came about, and the company I was working for wanted me to get vaccinated, and I was just absolutely not willing to be an experiment again. And I say again because I was working for the United States. I was a soldier in the Army at the time that the anthrax vaccines came out, and they gave me all 8 of them. And there were guys all around me that were getting Gulf War syndrome and all these other issues, and I'm pretty certain that I picked up a couple autoimmune issues as a result of it. And I just didn't. I don't trust the government, so I'm like, I'm not. No, the government. If the government, the media, and and the medical industrial complex is all saying you must do this, then there's a good chance it's probably not good. It's so I had a just a natural inclination to be a little bit less trusting of the government because I've worked with them for so long. And they've never instilled in me, that we should just automatically take what they say, on truth. But that forced me to go out there and start my own company. And so I started my own cybersecurity company, and we, I picked up a contract with the federal government as a, corp to corp, and so I'm a working contractor. But at the same time, my company picked up some work doing election integrity work. And so we did some work it started off, I did voluntary work with the White House. After the 2020 election, I was asked to come down and do that. And by the White House, I guess I kind of passed their sniff test, after what I did. But we provided data that was ended up in Peter Navarro's report. And then after that, I got hired by Judge Gableman up in Wisconsin to do some work up there for him, and then most recently, my company was hired by Los Angeles District Attorney's Office to provide the cyber forensic capture and a major investigation into an election management software in Michigan, a company called Conic. And so we were on site. We did the cyber forensic capture and provided all that evidence to Los Angeles District Attorney's Office, which the case was being ran by the ADA, but the district attorney, George Gascon, decided he was going to suppress the case, and so he ended up basically suppressing it, dropping the charges against Eugene Yu. And the claim is that they didn't drop it with prejudice so that they can continue to bring a case at some other time, but I just, I have my doubts about that. And there was a pretty significant findings that we found in there, though. So we've been involved in some pretty major, breaking cases. So our name, our company name, has gotten around, and one of the guys that I did the work with down in Washington D.C., joined my company, and because I knew once I decided to run, I'm gonna have to turn over my company to somebody else, and so the only guy that I trust is this guy who I've worked with, and just. We were in the trenches together, dealing with this stuff. So, and he's got a very extensive background in managing companies. So he's going to, take over for me. But, the truth is the reason I was bringing all this up is to say that this is not something that, benefits me in any way to do other than the fact that I love my country. And I want to ensure that my children get to live in a free country. And I was praying after this last election, and I was asking God to raise up righteous men and women to run for office. And I heard that still small voice again, and it said, "What about you?" And my initial response was, "Whoa, wait a minute, God. I just got my life back. I just started a company. Haven't I done enough? And this is going to put my family back out there, put us out there for scrutiny and the attacked by people, and just knowing, who I am, I'm not going to hold back, and it's going to probably be pretty risky for me because I'm not going to be one of these guys that's going to go down there and keep his mouth shut. So, I've learned never to say no to God. So I negotiated with him, but that doesn't generally work out in my favor always anyways. But I made a deal. I said, God, I'll tell you what, I don't see any opportunity. It was never in the cards for me to run for state office. I didn't have a job that would allow me to take off, the amount of time necessary to do that, even though I was, own my own company. I'm a working contractor, so I got to be on the job. And I knew the only way that would, work for me is if I ran for, something like, Congress or the Senate or something like that. And there was no option for me to run for the Senate because I'd only lived here for 2.5 years. So the only option was for me to run for Congress, for the U.S. House of Representatives. But, Mooney had just won re-election, and he won by a large margin, and he's got a pretty conservative voting record, and I'm just like, I'm not going to go up against an incumbent. It just doesn't seem to me, moral, to do that, unless the guy is, completely corrupt. Then yeah, it makes sense. But if somebody's doing their job and they're doing it fairly well, then my attitude is, hey, then keep driving on. But I made a deal. I said, God, if you create a path, I'll do it. But until you create a path, I don't see how I can. And I thought I'd, scored myself at least, 6 to 8 years or something before I could have to do this, and I could at least, be prepared for it. No, God doesn't work that way in my life. He always wants me to be in the thick of it, 100% dependent on him, because that way I can't claim any, glory for it, when I succeed. But I ended up 2 days later, I was typing Alex Mooney's name into Google search, and I was trying to pull up his page so I could send him a message about this Connick situation, because it was a national security issue of some things that we found. And as I'm typing in his name, it pops down and it says, 2 seconds ago, Alex Mooney announces he's running for the Senate against Joe Manchin. I'm like, oh, my heart immediately sunk, because last summer I literally got off of work at 2 o'clock every day, because I set my hours from 6 in the morning till 2 in the afternoon. And I look outside, it's sunny or it's not raining, I would go get out on my boat and I would just enjoy the whole afternoon on the water. And I love that. I grew up, going to the Colorado River and spending time with my family out on the water. And it's always been a dream of mine to be able to do that. And so, I was like out there every day. And I remember laying down on my boat, and I have a big pontoon boat, 24-footer, and I'm laying on it, and I'm just thinking, oh, this is the life. I finally arrived. I hope this never ends. Like, when you like you have a situation that you just could be content for the rest of your life. Like, I didn't need anything else. I had everything I wanted. Like, literally, I don't even need my house. I could just live on my boat and just enjoy it, right? And that's how I feel about it. I love it so much. And I'm laying there, and I said that to myself, and then all of a sudden I hear that voice again, and it said, "Son, this is just a break, a much-deserved break, but I've got other plans for you, so don't get used to this." And my heart sank, and I'm like, oh, man. And I had no idea at that time that it was going to be running for office. But this summer, I don't have any time, on my boat. My wife, I made her my campaign manager because my brother-in-law was actually at first really excited, wanted to help me, as a campaign manager, but he found that it was interfering with him and I think with his, some people have a natural inclination to get so much into something that they kind of lose themselves, and that was happening with him. And so he told me, after about a month, he's like, I'm going to have to back out of this. And I could tell he was heartbroken that he, was saying that, but he believed that, he was doing what was the right thing. It was interesting because my wife, I knew she had to be everywhere that I was going to be, everywhere. Because, number one, I don't want her complaining later, saying, you don't ever spend time with me. Now we're spending time all the time. But also, I've been around, working in the intelligence community, working in the Defense Department, working overseas, and I've just learned it's not a safe environment when you're a public figure and women coming around and things like that. And having her with me, it just ensures that nobody's going to set me up or try to plot some honey trap or something like that. So, and like I said, she's been wanting to spend more time with me. So now she's getting sick of me. But I told her, I said, hey, I was praying about what to do, and I told her, I said, I think you should be my campaign manager. She's like, no, I'm not cut out for that. I don't know anything about this, and she's very shy. But I called a good friend of mine at church who I confide in on things to ask for help and ask him to pray about it. And he goes, well, I already know the answer to this. Melody needs to be your campaign manager. And so that was like a confirmation. And she has done just a fantastic job. I'm seeing this different person. I'm like, who are you and what have you done with my wife? Because she's like energetic and talking to people, and she's like, you need to go out and just shake hands and talk to people. Now I'm the one that's being shy, and and it's funny, but she's been out there. So she got me out to 18 counties in the last month to speak. Wow. And many of those counties more than once. In fact, we were supposed to go to Randolph County, and we had to reschedule because we double booked, and so that they were like, oh, we were hoping to have you out here, and so we rescheduled, and then I came down with COVID, and I got over COVID and fairly quickly thanks to ivermectin and a good friend of mine who's a doctor that helped me, and I mean literally I was over it within about a week, but I had, that when you're running, you're doing this kind of stuff, and you're out there, you're getting, we would go to Parkersburg. We'd get home at like 2 a.m, and then I got to get up at 6 o'clock and start work. And then the next night we're out, in Randolph. And I mean, it's like, and we're all over the place, and we're getting home at midnight, and I'm getting, and I was not getting sleep. And so I think that's when my immune system was just like worn out. And I thought, if I do one more night without getting adequate sleep, I'm going to end up having a relapse. And I told her that. I said, I think I need you to cancel. And she's like, no. I'm like, what? And I said, no, I'm not feeling well. I need you to cancel. She says, no, you're not canceling. These people have already, you stood them up once. You're not going to stand them up twice. I don't care if you're not feeling well. You're going to go. And I said, look, I don't feel well. I feel like I need sleep. Well, you can sleep on the way there and on the way back, but you're going. And so she forced me to go. No one else would ever dare, think that they could talk to me that way. But she is the only person. That's why I call her the Secretary of War when I refer to her calling me, and my buddies are around. Though the Secretary of War is calling. But she will, but the thing about Mel is that she loves people, and she's a very compassionate person. That's why I fell in love with her, and she is not going to let the people down of West Virginia. I know that. She will push me, till it pushes me into an early grave. And but it's because part of it is I think she believes in me, and I really do love her for that. She's my biggest cheerleader. But yeah, she got me around, to 18 different counties to speak. And this month I'm going, wait a minute. Do you have any boat time scheduled? Because so I'm like trying to figure out, okay, can we do a fundraiser on the boat?
Yeah.
Let's do something like that. Make at least that way I can get out there. But
so I have a question for the position that you're running for. So taking your resume, what we spoke about, how can you make a change in the government? Because I'm sure, I'm not involved in government, but I'm sure it's not easy.
No.
I'm sure it's not hard. And the thing I really appreciate you saying is, I think more Christians need to be involved, because I 100% agree with that. We have a tendency as Christians to kind of slope back and, oh, well, that's the world. I don't want. But the only way you can change is to step in and change it, right? Yeah. So I really admire that. But how do you make a change? What can you do in this position to improve what we're looking at as Americans in our government?
So I see our country right now is really in a very dangerous place. We are at a precipice, where we're not teetering on it. We've fallen over the edge. We're in a free fall right now. We're watching our constitutional rights, dissolving in front of our eyes. We are seeing corruption, within the Department of Justice and FBI like we've never seen. Our military is weaker than it's ever been. Our national security, our borders wide open. We got, Chinese, Iranians, and Russians coming across the border, along with all of the, people from Latin America. We got massive problems with drugs, affecting. I mean, everybody I talk to knows somebody, that's been affected by it. And then you've got now all this transgender issues. I mean, there's so many problems going on in our country right now that, in all honesty, I think, from a standpoint of the average person, probably the wisest thing to do would be to stay as far away from the government as possible, move to a place like Grant County, West Virginia, and start preparing, to do it on your own when the government collapses and the whole, system breaks down.
So you mean put your head in the sand?
Yeah, I'd say that's probably, well, it's not putting your head in the sand. It's more like, making sure that you're taking care of your own.
Gotcha.
That's, in all honesty, if I didn't feel called by God to do this, that's what I'd be doing right now. So you asked, what can you do to change it? Well, the truth is, I don't think anybody can do anything to change it, not without God's help. Mm-hmm. I think we are at the point where we are going to need a miracle. But as I mentioned earlier, some of the things that have happened in my own life, I believe in miracles. I know God can do something to change things. It's going to mean we need a majority in both houses. And there's these issues. The way I deal with it is I do have a very extensive background in national security and a very extensive background in cybersecurity and cyber warfare, which is, I think we're actually under attack right now in cyber warfare. All of these chemical plants exploding and food, processing places. Mm-hmm. What I specialized in when I was with NSA was, industrial control systems and understanding how they get hacked, national critical infrastructure, why they're so insecure. Even that farm, the dairy farm that blew up, not too long ago, I immediately went online and look up that farm and find out, if there's any articles, and I found an article saying how they had automated everything. So they had all these machines, doing the milking and all of that and processing, that milk into, various food products and stuff. And so it was more than just a dairy. It was actually it was a manufacturing company producing something out of that milk, and everything was automated. They had very advanced systems there. So ICS is one of those things where it was designed so that some engineer could come in and do some things and then go away. But what's happened over time, they've integrated it with the internet, and the security protocols aren't there protecting things. And so I believe that what we're seeing right now happening in our country is our infrastructure is being tested by the enemy. That enemy primarily being the Chinese Communist Party, the People's Republic of China. They have very advanced military units that are experts in cyber. The team that I was on our specialty was looking at Chinese advanced persistent threats, in the area of cyber. And so I think, if we end up at war with them, that's the first thing they're going to do is they're going to attack our infrastructure.
Well, that's what a lot of people are saying that World War III actually is going to be. Yeah. It's not necessarily going to be nuclear. It's going to be cyber, where it's just you're shut down.
And I'll tell you something. When I was with the FBI, they had these like doomsday scenario type things that they would, do these exercises, or they would have these think tanks that would talk about, okay, if this happens, what would be the result? The worst thing, right, was an EMP, because the power grid going down in the city, I think it was like 80% death within I think 2 or 3 weeks, something like that. And the reason why is because people would kill each other because they can't get water, they can't get food, they can't get medicine, they can't do anything. And because everybody's so close together, people would start stealing and people would start killing each other just to survive. And that was actually, that report was one of those things that drove me, that was one of the first times I started thinking, I think I need to live way far away from the city. And so even when we were in Maryland, we lived way out in the country, and we had some level of autonomy. We had chickens, and we had a well and things like that. So, but these were things that concerned me, and the biggest thing is that breakdown of technology and its impact on everything. I mean, think about like all the things in your life, that are dependent upon technology, and or electricity, power. If that all of a sudden stops, I mean, even like those of us that live out in the country, a lot of people have well water. but you still got to have electricity to pump it up out of the ground, right? You still have to have, you may have chickens, and that provides one source of protein for you. But there's just a lot of things that, people got to think about. Like, how dependent are we on, we learned during COVID that if you shut down shipping and all of these things that we get from overseas, I remember going into Walmart and there was like half the shelves were empty. And it wasn't because people were hoarding or buying all the toilet paper. That was an interesting run. But the biggest problem was the shipping containers, the ships, because all the protocols for COVID were lined up for miles, hundreds of miles outside the ports. They couldn't get the stuff here. And so, the shelves were empty, in many cases. And so when you think about like baby formula and you think about, and the shortage that happened because of that, or you think about these other types of things that we rely on, even, feed for your animals and things like that. We've got to have better sustainability, to make sure that we can survive, in, the event of some crisis situation. So I've got, I have a pretty, doomsday, look at things, and because I understand the risks probably better than most. My job primarily in cybersecurity is a risk management job. I'm looking at, okay, what's the worst case scenario that could happen? And, and then, looking at like 10 different things that can go wrong. What's the worst? What do we need to focus on first? What's the least, and then, that's the thing that we'll get to if we have time. And that's where I spend a lot of my job doing is looking at those types of scenarios. And so I have grave concerns actually, about where our country is, but I'm not without hope. So you asked me what can be done. So I prayed about it, and because I don't have the answers, and so I went and I prayed and I went to sleep and I woke up and all of a sudden this thought was in my head. What does the Constitution say about that? So I opened up the Constitution, I'm reading through it, and there's this interesting thing in there under Article 1, Section 8. It's called an Article 1 tribunal. Now, one of the biggest problems that I see in America today is that we have a government that has become so powerful in their centralization of power, the executive branch in particular. They have this surveillance state now. All of these surveillance tools, like I mentioned, the FBI, being able to spy on people without warrants, and it's become weaponized, right? It's no longer just used towards our enemies. That's how they got those tools, right? September 11th, Patriot Act, we need to be able to spy and look at digital things, but we promise we'll never use it on Americans. Yeah. We're only going to use it on our terrorists, neighbors. And no, now it's being used on Americans. So the first thing happens that, we're going to use it on terrorists that are in the U.S., right? But we're not going, if we unmask an American, we're going to make sure and delete that information. Well, Obama did away with that at the very last month that he was in office. He took that unmasking rule and chucked it to the wind, and next thing you know, now you've got all these agencies able to share unwarranted evidence, digital evidence on people with other intelligence agencies. And the problem is with that is that when you have that, if you had a perfect system of perfect people that would not abuse the law, sure, it would be great. But when you give that kind of power to people who all of us are politically motivated in one way or the other, but I would say there's one party that's willing to violate the law and the Constitution more than another. And that's not always the case, but right now, clearly the Democrats don't seem to have any problem at all with authoritarianism or with going, and spying unwarranted on people or spying on campaigns or setting up, a candidate, with bogus charges to try to get him, unable to, run his government. The Democrats, they're really good at that. And part of the reason is because they're in lockstep with one another on everything. Us Republicans, we believe in individuality and we believe in individual freedom. And so our tendency is to not work together. And so also I would say that at least, a good portion of the Republican Party, not all of it, but a good portion of it really truly believes in the Constitution. I would say the Bible and then the Constitution, like in that order. The Bible is first and foremost, and then second, most holy book, is the Constitution.
Yeah, which was written with one inspiration from the Bible.
And I agree. I think I do think of it as as a inspired document. that has stood the test of time, but we have to follow it. So when you look at the Constitution, it has this thing in it called the Article 1 Tribunal. Now, it already exists. The U.S. Tax Court, for example, is an Article 1 tribunal. It is set up, the judges are not permanent. They're selected by the Congress, and they can adjudicate, tax-related issues. The military courts are Article 1 tribunals. But another one, and when you read it, it seems clear that the concern that our founders had was that if the federal government ever gets too powerful, and maybe they get together with the judiciary and they're able to, use tools of the state, in a non-judicious way, then we need another way to be able to kind of put them in check. And so that's where, Article 1 comes in. They can invoke it. They can basically put together a court to adjudicate agency issues. And the agency issues that need to be adjudicated are the government's spying on the American people. That's got to stop. And it needs to be investigated. Then it needs to go to trial. People who are investigated found that they've done these things. Government officials need to go to trial, and those that are convicted need to be put in prison. Then there's the issue of election tampering, election interfering. Mac Warner recently just said, at a Lincoln dinner, that the FBI is the greatest force for election interference in American history. And he's referring, of course, to the Twitter files that's been revealed that the FBI paid $3 million to Twitter to suppress the Hunter Biden laptop story. Here's the thing about though, that's just Twitter. Guaranteed, the FBI did this with Facebook. They did this with other, media outlets and other things like that. And so they basically were working on behalf of the Biden administration, on behalf of the Democrats. So they are, in a sense, right now, I believe that the FBI as an organization is now the paramilitary arm of the Democrat Party. Because what do paramilitary people do? They work for one party, and they go and they kick in people's doors, and they arrest people and put them in political jails and political prisoners. They use authoritarianism against the opposite party's people. And what did we see happen in January 6th? You've got people that have been sitting in jail for over 2 years. They've been denied their right to a speedy trial, guaranteed by the Constitution, their right to counsel. They've been denied their right to bail, also guaranteed in the Constitution. They have been, put in conditions. There was one story that I heard where these guys they're put in solitary confinement for up to a week with no showers, nothing but being allowed but a Bible and the jail handbook. They've been denied religious services for almost 2 years. They've been denied, access to, see their families or even get visitations. I mean, these are conditions that probably at this point violate the Geneva Convention. Like, in other words, we have to treat our war prisoners better than how these guys are being treated. And so this issue is so critically important because if we allow this thing to continue, then you have half the country right now that does not trust the FBI, and nor should they. They don't trust the Justice Department, and nor should they. And they're beginning to lose trust in all of our American institutions. And so we have to restore that trust, and we have to reunite the country. But the only way that's going to happen is if there's justice. So the first and foremost thing, and this is the most important part, I believe, of my campaign, and this is why, I took the oath 3 times, right? Once as a U.S. Army soldier, once as a Navy civilian, and once as a Marine civilian. And that oath was basically the same for all 3 of them. But the part that sticks out to me the most was, I swore to defend and uphold the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And we absolutely have enemies of the Constitution that are domestic, and that are in charge right now. And so, the other issues that concern me is, of course, the spying that they do through, by proxy, through these big tech corporations. Like I mentioned, I've been signed on to all of these things, and even though they classify these things to hide it so that nobody talks about it, the reality is if the government's doing something that's unconstitutional, the Constitution is the law of the land, and you need to blow the whistle on it. And so I have blown the whistle on some of these things, like the fact that they have immunity agreements with a lot of these companies so that they can spy on us and they can violate their policy, privacy policy, and get away with it. And then the government doesn't even need a search warrant for that. They just hand it over to them because they're going to pay them, like they did with Twitter. So these are things that have to be exposed. Like I said, people have to go to jail, that have violated these rights of American citizens, because what you have right now is a dictatorship. And these words, I think some people may see, Nate Cain's an extremist, but is it really? Because, I worked in Washington, D.C. after the election in 2020, and you know what I saw? I saw 10-foot fences put up around all of our government buildings with razor wire on them and armed guards with machine guns standing at the entry points to the people's house. Now, does somebody who really won the election, do they do that sort of thing? No. That's what dictators do. And so, maybe they should have thought about the optics of that. But what we saw at January 6th was people who genuinely believed, and I think were very, had very good reason to believe that the election was stolen. I mean, think about the fact that you had the Biden administration Biden got more votes than Obama. I mean, give me a break. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out something was wrong. Or you had many cases, states where there were more votes than there were voters. These are just simple things. But out of 57 courts that basically the cases were brought, every single one of them was denied an evidentiary hearing. So how can you have justice if you don't even have a court willing to listen to the evidence? And that's what happened.
So that's what I want to push back on too, because you'll have some that'll say, well, because the evidence wasn't really there. Mm-hmm. So, that's why.
Sure. So here's the problem, though. So under the, and there was a lot of people, I will admit, there was a lot of what I call red herrings. And
we have Dominion. Look, Dominion just took Fox to the bank.
Yeah, they did. But what's funny about that is who owns Dominion and who owns Fox? BlackRock. They have a huge ownership in both of that. So it's kind of like, a company suing itself and then getting a settlement from itself. And I would be interested to note, do they get a tax break for that? I mean, it's like, is that like, that might be a new way to, kind of benefit yourself. Break. So, but yeah, I do think that the focus on Dominion was not a smart thing, because I saw evidence that the same things that people had saw with certain, Dominion machines, I also saw with Heart Civic, and I also saw it with ES&S. And a perfect example was there were newspaper stories in Michigan, for example, and they had a case involving Heart Civic, and they had a case involving ES&S, but one of them was at Antrim, and I think the other one, I can't remember the county, but it was another county in Michigan. And in both these cases, you had an election that was done, and they said, oh, this guy's the winner. But then when they went back and they did a hand, recount, because they saw some irregularities, the irregularities were so bad that it changed the outcome of an election. What most people don't know is that the FEC's guidance for, and it's the EAC that's kind of taken that over, but the FEC has something called the voting system standards, and those are law. They are built into the law, into HAVA, the Help America Vote Act, and all federal elections have to abide by them. But what it states is that out of 500,000 out of 500,000 ballot positions. So that's like each circle, right? You're only allowed one error. That's it. If you have more than one error out of 500,000 ballot positions, the system is no longer certified, because it's not the same system that got certified. And so the question becomes, how can you have errors that way exceed that error rate? I mean, it was like 800 times the error rate allowable, and yet nobody, bothered to ask that question and say, well, how did that happen? So, there were major problems. Now, whether that error was a machine error or whether it was a human error, because, there was all kinds of interesting things that we found, but Antrim had something interesting that took place. There's one machine that you can actually change a ballot, and it's designed so that you have a Republican and a Democrat judge, and So maybe somebody brings in a ballot and it's got coffee spilled on it. You can see what they intended, but the machine won't read it because of the staining. They can take that ballot, go over to what's called the adjudication station, and they can create a new ballot, and then they spoil the other one, and all this has to be documented and everything, and then they take the new ballot and they run it through the machine. That's what that machine's for. Yet in the Antrim report, that was the only one where they actually got, really truly data from the machines and stuff. It turns out that the adjudication station was missing the log files for the day of the election. It had log files on it from before the election and log files after the election. What somebody in cybersecurity calls that is intent. That's what that is. When somebody deletes the records for one day, they had an intent to hide something. That should have alarmed, CISA. They should have been brought in to investigate that, but they didn't. So with this, so then why? That's almost sounds like, okay, you're a massive cover-up. Yeah.
A massive cover-up.
Yeah.
How does someone get away with that? Or it wouldn't be a person.
I will tell you how. As I was working on this stuff for 2 months without pay, I took a leave of absence because that's how important it was to me that, again, I look at it like this. If we can't get along as American citizens, if we can't trust each other, I want to, I realize that there are people who have different political views than me, and that's fine. I'm okay with that. But we all have to believe that we have equality under the law. That the law that I am held to is the same law that person's held to. That equal opportunity, equal justice. Those words mean something. They're important, and the reason is because they allow for cohesiveness and for an American people that you may have completely different backgrounds and culture and ideas, but you at least believe you all have the same. You all get the same access and the same judgments and the same court system and institutions. But when you feel that the institutions are rigged only to benefit one side, that's what leads to conflict. That's what leads to war. That's what leads to to violence. And so it was extremely important to me that we go after trying to see what happened and making sure to do things to try to fix things so that we could restore the American public's view of our institutions. But how they pulled it off, and because you're right, it is massive. It was not one way that they stole the election, I believe. One thing happened where you had all of these boxes all over the place, right? These ballot boxes, and that allowed for ballot stuffing. We saw that in the some of the evidence that was provided by what was it called, the True the Vote. Put out that information. Where they had videos of people going in. It was where it was illegal to ballot harvest. They had people who were shoving multiple ballots into these ballot boxes. Now, is that enough to change the election? That's the standard that was used. Not did they cheat. The fact is they cheated. The question, though, that the courts cared about was it enough to change the outcome? Because they didn't want to touch it.
That's basically what Carrie Lake is going through now in Arizona.
That's right.
She's having to prove that what happened would change the election.
Now, I can tell you, I was involved in helping with the investigation on the case related to Jesse, the truck driver. Do you remember the story about him? He was a truck driver that was in Bethpage, New York, and he was at a postal center, not a mail center. So they didn't deal with pieces of mail; they dealt with parcels, and yet. I want to say it was basically several gaylords of mail were loaded onto his truck, and when he looked at them, because he had to make sure they don't shift, and that they're all positioned right so that the truck doesn't get out of balance, he looks and he sees they're all ballots. They were all ballots, and this place doesn't deal with ballots. Now, I understand something about this because my dad owned a mail sorting business years ago when I was a teenager. And they did pre-sorted mail for the post office. But the fact is that every piece of mail that comes in there has to go through these machines called OCR readers. And it basically reads the barcode, and then it assigns a value for for the postage or the metering that is on that piece of mail, and then it charges that to the company where it came from. So we were talking about, like, I want to say it was something like $8 million worth of stolen postage, okay, is what we suspect, came through this parcel center. Because, and I brought in a couple of investigators that looked into this, and they broke the case wide open. They had confirmed up until this point, Phil Klein had been looking into, these things with the Amistad Project, and he had some investigators, and they had confirmed that Jesse had, in fact, everything that happened from when he came into Pennsylvania, they were able to confirm was true. But they couldn't confirm anything about what had happened in New York at this parcel center. They were having a hard time getting any statements out of anybody. So I brought in a couple of guys, and again, this was a God thing. I went down for dinner and was praying over my food, and I heard this voice say, hey, you need to contact these two guys, and they're investigators that, are really good. And so I went and I called them, and they were on a plane within 24 hours. They got down there. I introduced them to Phil Klein. They went up there. They got a statement from a woman working in the mail center who said, yes, I loaded those ballots onto the truck because I was told to. And I read her text message to him. So I've seen this with my own eyes. Her statement was that she had told her supervisors that she was not supposed to be, we're not supposed to be dealing with mail here. We're only a parcel center. And she was told to shut up and load the ballots anyways. And so she had talked to Jesse and said, oh, you're lucky you're carrying the ballots for the election. And so that's when he knew about it. And then he looked and saw, and they were ballots. And so he ended up, blowing the whistle on that, because he brought his truck into New York, or from New York into Pennsylvania. And then he was told by his supervisor at the trucking company, had a contract with the post office to drop his trailer outside of the location where normally he would put it inside the fence, and he was told to drop it, and so he dropped it, and that trailer disappeared, was never to be found again, with hundreds of thousands of ballots in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. So the likelihood is these were distributed all over the place, and then when they shut down the election, remember in the middle of the night they shut it down, everybody was supposed to go home, and then we come to find out
and it changed.
That's right, everything had changed. And see, they had access to a system, through what's called EMS, Election Management System, to where it reports the tallies, even though it's not the official tally, it reports the tallies into a GitHub repository. That's how the media knows what the numbers are before they've actually been officially counted. And so they knew the numbers. They had access to that. They were able to figure out, okay, how many ballots do we need? We had multiple cases of voter registration being majorly inflated in the run up to the election, and then after the election, all of a sudden, we're going to clear out 500,000 that shouldn't be here. So they had like a basically like a credit line of fake voters that they so we're talking a counterfeiting operation. This back to Beth Page. My guy, he found the guy who was bringing the ballots in, because he found out his name from the lady who worked there. And he was a guy who, when he was in, my investigator was in looking into him, turns out he had all kinds of BLM, anti-Trump stuff all over social media. And then he had a friend who he was communicating with who owned a print shop about 7 miles outside of Bethpage, who also had all kinds of BLM stuff all over his social media. And when he looks into that company and he started, probing and doing what he does as an investigator, and come to find out that print shop was a subsidiary to a company that had a print shop in Michigan that was suspected of doing the same thing. So I believe there was small conspiracies and big conspiracies that were nationwide. And in fact, it was so compelling that Bill Barr, basically my friend who has some background and connection with law enforcement, the one that I brought in, he's like, look, this is much bigger than what I expected. I have to bring in the FBI. So he contacted the FBI. Phil Klein met with him. They went down. They talked to the FBI. They got a task force set up with John Durham Jr., who was the Eastern District of New York U.S. Attorney at the time, which covered that area in Bethpage, New York. So they got the what was it? the mail, the U.S. Postmaster General have their own investigative team and unit. They brought them in, and they had the FBI involved, and there was a task unit being set up to go after this, and you had there was they were going to go do this. Oh, and Bill Barr was part of this. I was sitting in the conference room that Phil Klein's having these conversations with Bill Barr, with these FBI agents and all of this.
You mean Attorney General?
Yeah,
Bill Barr.
That's right. And so he was involved in this, so he knew what was going on. Obviously, he thought it was important because he's allowing all this to happen. All of a sudden, something goes haywire. I don't know why, but everything gets shut down. Everything. And then Bill Barr goes before Congress and he says, I never saw any widespread evidence of widespread election fraud, which was a flat out lie. And then he gets out, he leaves, he quits. Remember, he quits before before the change of
Trump was done.
That's right. And the guy who replaces him is a major anti-Trumper, the guy who's acting deputy for a little while, total anti-Trumper. The guy's been on record at the DOJ as talking crap about Trump. And that guy goes before Congress and says, we sent somebody. He was asked before Congress, what happened up in Bethpage? He was asked by members of Congress, and that guy says, we sent some people up there. There was nothing to it, so we dropped it. Total lie. So these people lied in Congress, and no justice occurred. The fact is, we don't know what happened, but it's interesting that after Bill Barr left, he gets this big book deal, and he's out there sharing, talking on news, having his book and everything, and of course he starts being anti-Trump and all of that. So I don't. So this gets down to the central issue of why the intelligence agencies have to be reined in, because when they have the level of ability to spy on the American people, they're also spying on members of Congress, members of the executive branch, presidents. I mean, if they're willing to spy on Donald Trump, you don't think they're willing to spy on
They
us?
don't care about little old me or anyone else.
They don't care about us, and they certainly don't. If they got the boldness to spy on Trump, which they did, they have no problem spying on sitting members of Congress and the Senate. Yeah. They have no problem spying on judges, including the Supreme Court Justice in the United States, which that came out, from a whistleblower that the CIA had spied on Chief Justice. And so when Robert, so when you think about that, they probably have dirt on a lot of these guys. And if they can't find, so I look like this, they have a threefold, mission to compromise somebody. They try to bribe them. Then if they can't bribe them, then they convince them to go, take a ride on the Lolita Express to, Epstein Island, and they get them, to, basically compromise themselves there, and they get some pictures of them, in a compromising situation with some young teenager, and now they got dirt on them, or they find something, they spy on them, they find something in there, as they're spying on them that they're having an affair or something like that, and now they've got dirt on them, and then the last thing is that if they can't get it on them, they go find somebody in their family that they can get it on, and so this. I honestly believe this is what's happening. I think that, we're looking at, who knows how many, but I imagine that there are several judges and members of Congress and members of, various administrations that are completely compromised, that have either been bribed or are under blackmail. And so they're being coerced, against their will. And I think this is why we see people get elected to Congress. And we know they're conservative, and then they go to Congress, and for maybe a year, maybe two, they're conservative voting, and then all of a sudden, they become the one vote that was necessary to pass some liberal legislation, or why,
then we end up calling them rhinos.
That's right. That's right. Or maybe they're pretty conservative, fiscally conservative, but then all of a sudden we see them, they're sending tons of money to the Ukraine. Why? What strategic interest do we have in continuing to dump a bunch of money that, by the way, much of it can't be accounted for? So, call me a conspiracy theorist. I don't think that, nowadays, the difference between a conspiracy theory and fact is about 4 weeks.
Yeah.
You know? And so I think that, and believe me, after the things that I've seen, I have no doubt in my mind that this kind of stuff is happening. Now, to the extent of how much it's going on, I have no idea. But I know it's happening.
So you're talking about the 3 Gs. They're using gold, girls, and glory.
Yep.
Which is common amongst the men. So here's my next question, because you want to win your run for the House of Representatives. So can you tell us about upcoming events you're doing?
Yeah.
And can you go through that? Your campaign manager left a long note with different colors to try to grab your attention.
I love the color code.
All right.
I see a lot of stuff.
This one's important.
This is locally.
This is local.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's coming up.
Yes, it is. So
it's a week away.
So June 3rd at 2 p.m. at the Landis Arts Center. I want to invite everybody to come down to that. And if you live in Petersburg or any of the surrounding counties for that matter, and you can make it to this event, it will be a great opportunity because I'll speak for about 45 minutes, and then afterwards I'm going to open it up for questions. And if somebody's got to leave, they can leave, but I will stay there until every question has been answered or they kick me out. And so the point is this is an opportunity for those of you who want to find out what I'm about and what I bring to the table and what ideas that I have. This is your chance to ask me to my face. And you can tell a lot from somebody when you're asking them, face to face. It's like sometimes when when you know that saying, right? You know how politicians lying, their lips are moving, right? Something that I always used to joke around with. Now I gotta,
now you're going to be a
right. So, but the fact is that the truth is that it's easy to say something in an interview, or more importantly, it's easy to do a campaign ad and say something, and you could be totally, blowing smoke. And because you practice it over and over again, and the camera's on you, you can take as many cuts as you want, so that if you look nervous or you look like you're lying, you just redo it until you don't look like that. There's a great video, and I can't remember the name. It's like Phil something or other, but it's like this guy did this commercial for supposedly a politician, and it's a joke, but he basically says what everybody believes happens to these politicians, that and he's
I saw that one.
Yes.
He's like, don't worry, I vote on anything that helps you, and I'll take them up.
That's right. Yeah,
like
and he says,
yes.
you can call me whatever you want. Even if you call me Phil, fill my mouth with farts or something, like that.
Yes.
So, yeah, I think if you
that.
Put "fill my mouth with farts," and look that up on YouTube.
You just got my 10-year-old son's vote for just for the record.
So the thing is that you don't know when there's a video commercial, right? Anything about this person. When you get them in front of you, though,
it's different.
That's when you can find out something. Because if somebody is lying, or if they are insecure about what they're saying, you're going to see it when you ask them and you hold, And I'm open about, somebody asks me something I don't know, I will tell them. I say, I've never heard of that, and but thank you for bringing it to my attention. I'll look it up. There's no way that anybody can know everything, and but I will tell you, I've had a lot of really great people that I've met in going and talking to all of these folks all over West Virginia that have brought some really great ideas. I mean, I can't take credit, really for any of them. Some even the ones that maybe came out of my mouth first, like the Article 1 thing, or using deprivation of rights under color of law to go after these guys, which carries penalties all the way up to life in prison, and the death penalty if somebody loses their life in the commission of having their rights deprived, and it can be applied to federal all the way down to local, and it can be applied to healthcare providers, which is interesting. That brings up a whole nother issue, which I'll leave off of this because I want you to be able to have it on YouTube. But you know where I'm going with it. But the point is that these ideas, they come from a lot of great people. And I've had some great people who have brought to me ideas about how to solve the problem of, CBDC, which is the central bank digital currency. We worry about them spying on our credit card purchases when we go buy a gun. But what about, when we have digital currency from the Federal Reserve shoved down our throats and we don't have any choice? Yeah. Well, there are options. There are things that we can do. Like we can create a gold and silver mint that's under the Constitution, allows the state to have the right to mint gold and silver. So the question is how do you deal with gold and silver it can't just be minting it and selling it as like collectibles like we do now. It has to be legal tender, and that is what it actually says it can be. And so there are things to do that. How do we get the gold and silver into West Virginia? Well, what about all of the, I think it's $7.9 billion that we export, to other countries from West Virginia? What if we told the companies that are exporting, you need to, we highly recommend that you accept payment only in gold or silver, because that's what we're going to expect you to pay your taxes in. Guess what's going to happen? They're going to go to China and say, we don't want US dollars. We don't want CBDC. We want gold and silver, and which you have a lot of. And so, if you want our coal, you want our natural gas, our liquefied natural gas,
you want our wood products,
you want our beef, you want our dairy, whatever, fine. We'll sell it to you. We're all for, free trade and commerce and keeping people employed, but we want to be paid in gold and silver. So that would quickly fill up the treasury of West Virginia with gold and silver that could be used as legal tender, and then they create their own system, here of legal tender with gold and silver that could be, used. Texas, by the way, just signed a bill to do something similar to that. And so, if other states did that, and then we created agreements in between each other to have, some, interstate commerce that gets paid in that, I think we could basically, give the double barrel middle finger to the Federal Reserve.
Yeah.
And so, in a way that is perfectly legal. So that's one idea. That idea came, by the way, from at least 3 different people who I talked to who brought this up to me about gold and silver. They said, hey, have you thought about gold and silver? And I'm like, well, yeah, we can't print currency. Only the federal government do that. And they go, they can mint gold and silver. And I'm like, they can? And he says, yeah, look in the Constitution. So I went and I looked. Sure enough, holy moly, it's there. I don't know why I hadn't seen it before. But these ideas are coming from people I'm talking to. Somebody, I saw all the stuff going on with the depletion of our strategic petroleum reserve, and I'm thinking to myself, Joe Biden's depleted it by like 20%, which brought it down now under 40%, which puts us in a very dangerous place because we're not drilling, and we're depleting and we're selling it off, by the way, to China. The primary
makes
people.
No sense. We should be
treason.
At least selling it here.
Yeah.
I mean, at least.
Exactly. And then on top of it, we're going in and buying oil from Venezuela, our enemy, a communist country. Oil that's really not that good either. It's been sitting in rust buckets for over a decade. And but the bottom line is that thought about that. I thought, why we have vast resources under the ground and above the ground in West Virginia. We've got massive amounts of natural gas, oil, and coal. Why aren't we having our own strategic, basically a state strategic petroleum reserve, or a state strategic coal reserve, or a state strategic, gas reserve? We should have those things here, because if we end up in a situation where, Biden has screwed up the economy so bad that we're going to have like some, ungodly, winter storm that comes through, or power gets knocked out, what's going to happen to all the people that are poor in West Virginia? How are they going to heat their homes in the winter? We would have the resources available to, provide, those services to people on fixed income, to people who are low income, and to reduce the cost for those of us that are, just trying to survive. These are things that, this is like what Joseph did in the Bible, right? He went in and he said, hey, we're going to take grain and store it away. Yeah, we need to be doing that with our resources here in West Virginia. And the biggest thing that West Virginia needs to do, in my opinion, and granted, these are not things that a federal congressman necessarily does. They're things the state legislature needs to do, things the governor needs to do. And I've had people tell me that, but here's the deal. Donald Trump was the president of the United States, but he demonstrated to all of us that you can use your bully pulpit of the office of your position to get things done. He got deals made, before he was even president. When he won, but he hadn't taken office, he was already on the phone calling people, making deals, talking them into coming back to the United States, repatriating all these dollars that were overseas. We had, and I could do the same thing. As a congressman, I could lobby, and I intend to lobby on behalf of the people of West Virginia, to lobby these guys in Charleston, who there are some good guys down there, but there's a lot of guys down there that, honestly, I don't know that they really are listening to their constituents or meeting them. I met with one that was really great just today, who holds a meeting, once a month with his constituents, and he, or maybe it was once a week even, and he's meeting with them, talking about the different issues and stuff. That's what representation means. That's what it should be happening. And so, to me, I would see part of my job would be not only dealing with things in Washington, but also, trying to get these knuckleheads, to get some things right here.
Yeah. Well, we have a $1 billion surplus now, so we
West
can.
Virginia
we,
does.
we can
believe it
afford
or not.
Yeah.
All right, so your
so
campaign
but
manager.
let's just say this one more time.
But hold on. There's more. There's more than that.
I just
Oh,
wanted
okay,
to-
sorry.
Because it's local.
Okay,
and it's
gotcha,
coming up.
gotcha.
June 3rd, 2 p.m., Landis Arts Center here in Petersburg. Nate Cain. So
Yeah, sorry.
that's that one. Okay.
There's
so where do
a
we have
convoy to Charleston. Your campaign manager is giving me the side that I have to have this because
Yes.
she's worked hard on this, and you're sleeping with your campaign.
That's
manager.
right.
next? Is that
So you better get
allowed?
that right. I'm a whistleblower on
Probably
that.
some
Just for the record.
FEC rule against that, right?
For the record. So tell us about the convoy to Charleston. That's
Okay.
coming up in August.
So one of the issues that, again, I can't take credit for this, but as we've been going around talking to people all over the state, one issue that comes up everywhere, and it's usually moms, but also it's a lot of times it's dad too, but they're bringing up this issue, is these pornographic books that are in our schools and our school libraries and things like that. Now, I'd heard this issue before, but it wasn't until I was at a MOVCAC meeting in Parkersburg, and the guy gets up there, and it's all adults in the room, but he shows the pictures that are in the book, and he reads something, and it was like, I can't even repeat it because it's so indecent that it would probably get you fined or something. And I mean, it's just like it, and I can't do it just because it's that embarrassing. It's so disgusting, the things that were in these books, and the fact that they're allowing, and not just allowing, but encouraging this kind of material for 8-year-olds is just beyond me. I mean, that's another problem in our country, that we've seen this pedophilia, push forward. That word groomer that the LGBT community doesn't like being
We're not
used.
allowed to use that anymore, are we?
But where I first heard that term? The first time I ever heard that word was on a Law and Order Special Victims Unit TV show, and they were talking about how pedophiles groom, children by exposing them to pornography and and nudity and all these other things going on inside, under the basically behind closed doors. They expose these children to it. Well, now they're not even doing it behind closed doors. We got it happening in the schools, in the classrooms, and so this convoy is really about a couple of things. One, they were supposed to look at legislation for that in the last session, and somehow I got left out. We are also one of the few states that does not have a religious exemption for vaccines, and we should. I think we're like one of 7 states that doesn't have that. How is that possible in a state like ours? A state where, what is our motto? Mountaineers live free, right? Freedom is what everybody I meet in West Virginia is all about. It's why I chose to live here, and I think we need freedom to choose, our health care and the health care of our children. I don't think children should be forced to get vaccines.
And so this is in August. Do we have a date in August?
Not yet.
Okay.
We will get a date on that soon, but we have to find out when they're going to hold, their special session. But the idea behind it is I'd like to see people from all over West Virginia show up, drive to Charleston. We hold a press conference, and we put the political pressure on our legislature to pass a legislation to ban these books and and get this filth out of our schools.
Agreed.
and pass something to allow for never again should we ever be coerced and be forced into taking vaccines, and that includes children and adults. But also the other thing too is that parents have rights. Parents have a right to know what their children are being taught.
Agreed.
And so we want to see, if not a parent's bill of rights, we want to see those rights at least defined in legislation.
I've been working on this with some of the local and trying to get in loco parentis removed from the West Virginia's legislation, which gives the parents, the teachers, the same rights as the parents in school.
That's
and
not,
and we're
insanity.
we're one of the only last states that have it. And I've been trying to let's get rid of this.
That's the kind of stuff that I want to see happen, because what happens when the people get mobilized and they show up at things And the legislature, they see the cameras, and the idea is to show up, not to say, hey, you need to do this. The idea is to actually write the legislation.
Yeah.
There's a lot of great people who have volunteered that have written legislation before. They're either retired legislators or lawyers that deal with constitutional law, like my campaign attorney that said that he would be willing to help. But the idea is to write the legislation, take it to them, and say, hey, will you support this? Okay, great. Bring it up right now. Or will you support this? No? Okay, great. Media, these guys will not support it. I mean, that's the idea.
And put pressure on them.
That's right. So when people tell me, Nate, you're not running for state office, you can't get anything done in the state. Baloney. That will do it. Mm-hmm. There are things that we can do, and it's going to take more than me. If I show up there, I'm going to be laughed off the stage. But if hundreds of people show up, it is going to make a difference.
Okay, September. Let's go to in order here.
Well,
okay?
let me ask a question real quick. So to get these dates, can we visit NateCain4WV.com? Will that be a place to find out about dates of events?
Yes.
Is that a good?
We will post our events on there, and
the
also
website.
On our Facebook page. We also have the handle for all of my media, and I have almost every social media that's out there. I've got an account.
MySpace. I'm just kidding.
MySpace. Oh my gosh, that's so long ago.
I'm kidding, obviously.
I think I do have one on there, but don't look it up because it's so long ago. I don't know.
AOL Messenger.
Yeah.
No, but like everything that is used today, I just opened a MeWe account, which is another one. So, but I've got everything from Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. The three main ones, obviously. True Social, Gab, Getter, and MeWe. Minds is another one that I just opened up recently, which is a great alternative to Facebook, by the way. And let me keep plugging that because Facebook is the biggest spy out there. But but anyway,
but that was once again.
The handle is Nate Cain, the number 4WV. So it's just like my website, Nate Cain, the number 4WV.com, or @ Nate Cain WV. Nate Cain 4WV is the handle that I have for just about everything.
Okay. September 23rd, Whistleblower event.
So this is not set in stone yet, but we are looking at. I'm working with some people to try to put together. This would be in Northern Virginia, probably around Dulles Airport. But we're putting together. And I'm working with some organizers that we're looking to put together an event that would bring some big name whistleblowers, myself included. And hopefully we can get a number of others there. But the idea is to talk about the weaponization of the FBI and hold a conference. And really the idea behind it is not just to share our stories, but to talk about solutions. And so we're hoping that we can draw some legislators in from Washington to come hear us or maybe even speak, those that are maybe on the weaponization committees and things like that, because we got to have solutions. Whistleblowers right now, even though they're supposed to be protected, the reality is they're not. As we just saw this last week in the weaponization committee, these FBI agents, there's a reason why more people aren't blowing the whistle, because they lose their careers, they lose their livelihoods. Oftentimes when they're at their most vulnerable, when they have their children are young and they are dependent on them, and that's a terrible place to be. And so we have to do better to protect whistleblowers.
The one gentleman, they were trying to say he wasn't a whistleblower, so therefore he wasn't protected. Freedom Rally.
So this is one I'm really excited about. So our campaign has decided that we're going to put together an event, Freedom Rally, and we're looking to hopefully host this in Clarksburg because there's a certain law enforcement agency that has a big function there that shall not be named. But nonetheless, I think it would be a great place to have this event because we intend to have, we've already got confirmation that Ashley Babbitt's mother is going to be there to speak. I obviously will be there speaking. Also, Sarah McAbee, her husband was the sheriff's deputy that witnessed Roseanne Boylan be murdered by Capitol Police, and then he tried to save her, and then even when one of the officers was pushed down to the ground, he tried to lift him up. Every time he lifted him up off the ground, he was charged with assault with a deadly weapon. This man is served 7 years as a sheriff's deputy and was there on January 6th, and they're trying to give him 68 years, and he didn't commit any violence at all. And basically they're just trying to make an example out of him. And the fact is his wife's going to be there. He's been basically he was in solitary confinement for like 7 days without any shower, without any, basically it's illegal what they did to him. And they've had him in a what they call 23-1, which he gets 23 hours of the day in a cell. That's a 4x4 cell, and then he gets one day. I mean, look, pedophiles are getting better treatment than these people, and so we want her to come and tell that story because it's very compelling, and she talks. She does a really good job explaining what has been done to him. I'm trying to work on getting others there. I'd like to get Kyle Seraphim and Steve Friend, but I haven't gotten commitments yet. So we have to raise some money to be able to get these people here. But also Derek Evans in the 1st District. He was a January 6er himself that ended up having to go to jail for 4 months for basically doing nothing more than walking into the Capitol. When the police opened up the gates and opened the doors, he even fist pumped one of the police officers and said, "Thank you for your services." He was walking in. He didn't do anything violent. He didn't commit any, crime. But yet they basically told him, "We're going to give you 20 years unless you cop to a lesser offense." And so he did, because he didn't, he's got kids. He didn't want to spend, 7 years in prison, trying to fight his case out. And so he's going to be there, and he'll be speaking. And then we've also invited and gotten a commitment out of Chris Rose. Thank you. Yeah, Chris Rose. Chris Rose. I've talked to him a number of times. He's actually a really great guy. Look, I'm all for other candidates and everything, but what I like about Derek Evans and Chris Rose is I believe that we're kind of cut from the same cloth. And these are guys who are just your everyday average guys that love this country, that love freedom, that love the Constitution. And I'm not saying that other candidates don't feel that way, but what's great with these guys is they give me the time of day, and I've talked to them and actually suggest. So I asked them if they'd come down and talk, and they said yeah. And so we're going to be there doing that, and I'm working on another big name. I don't want to say it yet because I want to get a commitment before I do. But
I'm available October 4th.
but the idea would be to hold an event, and we're going to talk about basically we're going to talk about freedom and what we intend to do to support it.
Fundraising.
I need to know about this because that looks like Orange Man bad.
Yes, right. All right, so this one of the hardest things about running for office I've found
I want the camera to see it. Sorry.
Has been raising money, and part of the reason for it is that I've spent my entire life trying to be self-sufficient and not have to ask for money from anybody. I mean, that's my whole goal in life from when I was a teenager, right? But now what I'm doing in running for office, it is something that is extremely expensive. Mm-hmm. It's my wife and I, we put 8,000 miles on our car in the last 2 months. We just bought a brand new car, and I changed the oil, and then all of a sudden the light's on again. I'm like, what? This thing's broken. Take it back to the dealer, tell them to fix it. And she does, and she comes back and goes, yeah, it cost me this much money because we had to change the oil. I'm like, what? Mm-hmm. Why'd you do that? She said, because we put 8,000 miles on our car. And I was like, what? But that's what's going on. We're traveling all over the place. We are doing, we're printing things like these that, to hand out to people. When we do these events like, this event that we're doing at Landis Center, they're not letting us do this event for free. So, we have to fund these types of things. And we have some people that are helping us, but we're asking for your help. We need people that are going to help us. And one of the things I know a lot of people, are going through, hard times right now and are struggling. And so one thing that we wanted to put out there was there's a great company called Make Honey Great Again. And I love their deal mm-hmm. here. So they have this teddy bear, jar, but it has Donald Trump's face on it. And it says makehoneyGreatAgain.com. And so you can go to makehoneyGreatAgain.com and you can order honey from them. This is pure, unadulterated honey. It has no corn syrup, no added sugar, none of that. And it is delicious. But what's great about this also too, and I love it, says Ultra Maga Honey. All right. And but the important thing is if you go to this website, that's makehoneyGreatAgain.com, please put in a code when you order the honey, Raising Cain, all together, Raising Cain. And that's RAISINGCAIN, just like Cain and Abel, no relation. But the fact is when you do that,
there is a relation.
when you do that though, this company will give our campaign $8 out of the $20 for this bottle, and that's a great thing.
Very kind.
It gets something for you that's wonderful. That's got this great Donald Trump face on it, and and at the same time it helps out our campaign. If you can donate more and you have the means to help us out, on our website there is a donor link, and we would love your help, because the fact is I can't do this alone. There's no way that I'm going to be able to succeed without the help of people like you here in West Virginia. We have a lot of help that people have donated, and we've raised about $20,000. About $7,000 of that is my own, so I have skin in the game. But the reality is I can't keep that up. I have bills to pay too, and I need help. And I think if everybody even gave a small amount, it would be enough to push us over the edge and help us to be able to really do the things that we're going to be required to do, like advertise. Advertising is probably the worst. I mean, that's the most expensive thing. Just to run ads in a newspaper, for our last event, I want to say it was like $700 or something like that, for like just a small ad. Yeah. So, and bigger ads cost more money. But these are things that you guys can help us with. Also, there's a place for you guys to go on to on our site. There's a place where you can connect with us. We have a connection form, and if you want to volunteer for our campaign, we would love to have your help. We have some great volunteers right now that are helping. One of them here in Petersburg, which has just been awesome. Lee Seville, she's just been so awesome. I mean, she helped us put this event on. She really, designed our flyers. She spent money of her own to help us, and I can't say enough about her. She is a wonderful person, and just God bless her if she hears this. And then we've got other great people too that are helping us in other counties, and so we really do need help. We need people that are going to help with various things that you have. If you have time or if you have the energy, we would love to have you help us. And the last thing I want to ask for is that please pray for us. This is very taxing. It's very difficult. I've seen a lot of spiritual warfare, since we started this, and so we pray every day. But we need the prayers and support from others that are out there. And if you know or want to get a hold of us and want to have us come on your show, if you have a show, or if you know somebody that you want to introduce us to that you think is important and influential that we need to meet, please reach out to us. We will absolutely. And even if you are willing to host an event in your home and have 10 to 15 people and bring them together, we will drive out and do an event at your house. And so one of the things that really probably the thing about me is I'm a little bit rebellious, and I think God tends to use that in me. So when somebody tells me I can't do something, it just pisses me off, and so it makes it all the more, I work all the more harder to prove them wrong. And I went and I was speaking to a legislator here in West Virginia, and he told me, if you want to win, don't waste your time in all these small, population counties. Just focus on Berkeley County and Jefferson County and Wood County and Ohio County. Go to basically Martinsburg and Wheeling and Parkersburg, and just focus there, because that's where the population centers are. And you just don't waste your time in all of these low population counties. I was offended. I mean, I was irate, and I told him, I said, excuse me, I said, I'm running to be a representative, and that word representative means something. And so I have made it a point now to try to, every chance I get, to rub it in his face by, getting out and talking to as many people as I can. We probably met over 5,000 people that I've shook hands with, which just strengthens my immune system. So, but the fact is that we want to meet you. We want to get out and talk to you. I want to be as personable and open and honest with you as I can. And I have no intention of being a politician that goes to Washington, D.C. and then you never see me again. I absolutely, I'm not doing this because I want to go be a politician. I'm doing this because I love my country and I love my family and I love freedom. And I really do feel like it's at risk right now. And I think that if we have an opportunity to meet you, I think it would be awesome. And so that's one thing we found about West Virginia. When I first started this, I didn't know the people of West Virginia. I hadn't even been out of, the Eastern Panhandle, I mean, for those of us that live here, we know it's hard to get from point A to point B because you got to go down a holler and over a mountain and through the woods and everything else. But the fact is that I had fallen in love with West Virginia as a state. Its ideas of freedom, its ideas of liberty, the kind of attitude of live and let live, and those are things that attracted me to West Virginia. The fact that people love God, love their country. You don't see people ashamed of God. In fact, you see churches on Sunday, even tiny little churches, and they're packed, and people are going to church. And there's things about West Virginia that attracted us here. The love, of our Second Amendment is something that's extremely important to me. But I hadn't met the people. When we went out and we started visiting places, I honestly thought, oh man, this is going to be hard because, I'm not from here. I've been here only 2.5 years, and, there's people that are going to look at me and they're like, who's this outsider? And, where are you from? And, California. Oh my gosh, go back to California. I thought that's what it was going to be like, but it's been exact opposite. Other than one person who called in and left me a nasty message, which I just laughed at because by the end of the conversation, I realized she was a Democrat. But the fact is that every single person that we have met has just been the most warm, loving, nicest people I've ever met in my life. I mean, I've fallen in love with the people of West Virginia, and I'm just excited. I'm excited to be here. And actually, the going out and meeting people is the best part of this whole experience. It's a drag sometimes to ask for money. It's a drag to all of the forms I have to fill out and all the paperwork. Oh my gosh, the FEC worse than the IRS. I mean, just unbelievable, the rules they have and everything. There's a lot of things I don't like about this, and honestly, I'm gonna hate it when I have to go to Washington D.C. Every time I go down there, I feel like I need to take a shower when I get back just to wash all the scum off of me. But I'm not looking forward to that. But what I do love about this is I love the fact that I get to meet you guys, to meet the people. And I'm hoping to be able to do that as much as I can, and then find a way, even when I'm busy in Washington, D.C. representing, us here, you guys here, I want to make sure that I get back here as often as I can and come out. And I do intend, and I've heard people complain about other politicians who said they were going to show up and they never show up again. That will not be me. And I'll tell you why that won't be me is because my wife won't let that happen. She will be on me, like white on rice, to make sure that I'm getting out there. And I intend to. I absolutely intend to.
Okay, so since you're a Second Amendment lover,
yes,
for the people that do not like Donald Trump, you can still buy this, take it out back, and use it for target practice.
That's true.
And money still goes to his campaign, and you get the joy of seeing it blow up.
Just eat the honey
Problem
first, because
solved.
it's good honey.
There you go. Nate, thank you for coming here to my little podcast and joining us. We do appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. This is, like I said, this is the part of it I love. Is getting to meet people like you, and this is great. I mean, I'm excited about it.
So off air, we'll take bets on how long it's actually allowed on YouTube. So everyone, as normal, always on Explore, Grant County, Hardy County. There's 7 of them on YouTube. It's just Explore, and then on Rumble also Explore. So check us out for more coverage. Thank you once again.
Thank you.
Everyone, have a great night.